A Hell's Angels boss walks into a small-town diner at closing time. 8 bikes, 8 men, 1 waitress. He leans across the counter, tells her to go in the back. Stay out of it. She doesn't move. He steps closer. She draws a knife and puts the blade against his throat. The whole room stops. He doesn't reach for anything, doesn't call his men, just looks at her, and something shifts in his eyes. Something he hasn't felt in 30 years. He walks out, but he can't stop thinking about her, because she held that knife the way someone holds a thing they've already decided to use. Calm, certain, like she'd been waiting her whole life for exactly this moment. This is the story of what happens when the past finds you, whether you're ready or not. The kind of heat that stays after sundown. That's West Texas in July. You step outside at 9 o'clock at night, and the air still weighs on you like a wool blanket. The sky goes dark purple, then black. Stars come out sharp and cold up high. But down here on the ground, everything is still warm, still dry, still waiting for something to break. Dusty Creek had about 2,300 people on a good census year. Most of them were getting older. Most of their kids had left. The grain elevator on Route 9 hadn't run at full capacity since 2007. 2 gas stations, 1 pharmacy, 1 hardware store, 1 diner. Harlan's Diner had been on the corner of Main and Dexter since 1961. The sign out front still said Harlan's, even though Harlan himself had been dead for 12 years. His daughter Loretta kept the name because she said changing it would feel like burying him twice. Loretta Fitch was 66 years old and built like someone who had carried heavy things her whole life without complaining about it. Wide shoulders, hands that had seen more dish soap than most people see in a lifetime. She wore her gray hair pulled back tight, and she moved through her diner the way a person moves through their own living room. Deliberate, comfortable, like she owned every square foot, because she did. She had owned it outright since 2003. Tonight, she wished she didn't. The diner closed at 9. The last real customer, old Pete Sallow. Coffee and a slice of peach pie, same as every Tuesday, had shuffled out at 8:45. Darly Calloway was wiping down the counter. She did it the same way she did everything. Steady, methodical, working from left to right, folding the cloth over after each pass, so she was always using a clean surface. She was 26, medium height, heavyset in a way that had made people underestimate her since she was about 12 years old. She had dark hair she kept in a braid. She had brown eyes that didn't look away from things the way most people's did. She was wearing the diner's standard uniform, white shirt, dark pants, a small apron tied at her waist. At the back of that apron, half hidden by the knot, was a leather sheath. Inside the sheath was a knife. Fixed blade, 4 inches, handle made of dark walnut wood with a pattern carved into it by hand. Her grandmother had made that handle. Darly had been carrying the knife for 8 years. She had used it exactly once, to cut a seatbelt off a man whose truck had gone into a ditch on Route 9 in the middle of a hailstorm. He had never thanked her. She hadn't expected him to. She was on her 3rd pass of the counter when she heard the motorcycles. Not 1, not 2, 7, maybe 8. The sound came from the east end of Main Street. Deep and rolling, the kind of engine note that you feel in your back teeth before you hear it in your ears. Loretta, who was counting receipts at the register, stopped counting. Neither of them said anything. The engine slowed, stopped right outside. Gideon Cross was 62 years old. He had been the president of the Dusty Creek chapter of the Hells Angels for 11 years. Before that, he had been a full patch member for 14. Before that, he had been a prospect for 8 months, which was on the short side. But nobody had argued with the timeline. He stood 6'1", not as heavy as he'd been at 40, but still solid. He wore the same thing he wore every day. Dark jeans, worn boots, a plain black t-shirt under his cut. His cut was black leather, faded at the shoulders, with the chapter patch on the back, and enough years of road dust pressed into the seams that no amount of cleaning would ever fully get it out. He had a jaw like a piece of limestone and a scar that ran from his left cheekbone down to his chin, thin and white, from a fight in a parking lot in Amarillo in 1997. Nobody who had been in that fight ever talked about it. Nobody who knew Gideon ever asked. His hair was iron gray and cut short. His eyes were the color of creek water in winter. Light, clear, and cold. He pushed open the door of Harlan's Diner. The bell above the door rang once. He walked in like he was checking the place over before buying it. Eyes moving left, then right, then to the back. His chapter filed in behind him. 6 men. Cole Draper was the last one through the door, 29 years old, built like someone who had grown up doing physical work, a serious face that didn't sit quite right on someone his age. Gideon pulled out a stool at the counter and sat down. He put his forearms on the surface. He looked at Loretta. Loretta looked back at him. She had known this was coming. She had been waiting for it the same way you wait for a filling to fall out. You know it's going to happen, you just don't know which bite. We're closed, she said. Her voice was even. I can see that. Gideon's voice was low and unhurried. He had the particular West Texas accent of a man who had grown up working with his hands. No excess in it, no performance. Won't take long, Loretta. I need a cup of coffee and about 10 minutes of your time. I said we're closed. I heard you. He didn't move. She looked at him for 3 long seconds. Then she turned, picked up the coffee pot, poured him a cup without slamming it, and set it down in front of him. He wrapped both hands around it. Darly had stopped wiping the counter. She was standing 12 feet away, cloth in her hand, watching. Gideon spoke without turning his head. You need to go in the back. He meant it for her. The girl Darly didn't move. Gideon turned then. He looked at her the way he looked at most people when they didn't follow a clear instruction, with the particular patience of someone who has learned that patience works better than volume. I'm talking to Loretta, he said, not you. Go in the back. Darly set the cloth down on the counter, slowly. Then she put both hands flat on the surface and looked at him directly. She didn't say anything. She just looked. That was the first time it happened. The small, wordless thing that he would think about later. He was used to people looking away, looking down, finding something else to focus on. It was a reflex when a room full of men in cuts walked in and the president looked at you. Most people had it. They weren't cowards. It was just physics. Weight seeks the lowest point. This woman didn't do it. She looked at him the same way she had been looking at everything else in the diner all night. Steady, clear, like she was assessing the situation and hadn't finished yet. Gideon let a beat pass. Then he turned back to Loretta. Victor Aldridge filed the purchase offer 6 weeks ago, he said. He said it quietly, conversationally, like they were picking up a discussion from earlier. You didn't respond. I don't want to sell, I understand that. But the offer is fair. It doesn't matter if it's fair. The diner isn't for sale. Gideon turned the coffee cup in his hands. Loretta, he said, I'm going to be straight with you. The development is happening. The property line runs through this block. Aldridge has already bought the hardware store, the empty lot next to it, and the 2 residential parcels on Dexter. The diner is the last holdout. Then the diner is the last holdout. That's not a position. That's just stubbornness. Sometimes they're the same thing. Gideon's jaw moved. Not anger exactly. More like the expression of a man who has had a long day and has about 40% of his patience left. The offer goes away in 12 days, he said. After that, there are other ways this gets resolved. Zoning, infrastructure access, water utility easements. You'd need a lawyer, a good one. The kind that costs more than a diner makes in 6 months. Loretta's eyes didn't change, but something around her mouth went tight. He saw it. He had been reading people in difficult rooms for 30 years. He saw it. He wasn't glad about it. That was the truth. And it was a truth he kept mostly to himself. He had been in this business long enough to know how these conversations went. He had been in enough of them to be tired of the going of them. You pushed. The person bent. The deal moved forward. Aldridge got what he wanted. The chapter got its percentage. He took a drink of the coffee behind him. 2 of his men had pulled stools from the lunch counter and sat down. One of them, a thick-necked man named Garrett, laughed at something the other one said, loud. The kind of laugh designed to fill a room. The diner felt smaller with them in it. Then it happened. He heard the sound of footsteps, not retreating toward the back. Coming closer. He turned. Darly Calloway was walking toward him. She stopped 2 feet away, close enough that she had to look up slightly to meet his eyes, but she did it without any adjustment in her expression. No hesitation, no performance. She just stopped and stood there, and the look on her face was the same one she'd had before. Assessing. You need to leave, she said. Her voice was level. Not loud, not shaking, just level. One of the men behind Gideon made a sound, half laugh, half something else. Gideon held up one hand without turning around, and the sound stopped. He looked at her. I said you need to go in the back. This is Loretta's place, Darly said. She told you it's closed. You should go, young lady. My name's Darly. This doesn't concern you. It concerns Loretta. Loretta concerns me. There was a particular kind of silence that happened in rooms when something unexpected occurred. Not loud silence. Not tense silence. Just a pause in the ordinary rhythm of things, like a clock skipping a tick. That silence was happening now. Gideon Cross had spent 34 years in a world defined by hierarchy, by respect for position, by a clearly understood order of things. He had not been spoken to this way, in this kind of setting, in a very long time. Not because people had stopped having the impulse, but because by the time most people were in a room with him and his men, the impulse had been adjusted. He stood up from the stool. He was 6'1". She came up to about his chin. He took one step toward her. What happened next was not fast. It was not dramatic. There was no shouting. Darly's right hand moved to the back of her apron. She drew the knife. She brought it up and placed the flat of the blade against the side of Gideon's throat. The edge was to his skin. The tip pointed back along his jawline. Her grip was straight and still. No trembling, no repositioning. The room stopped. Gideon did not step back. He did not reach for anything. He stood exactly where he was. Then he looked down at her, and she looked up at him, and neither of them moved for what felt like a very long time. Cole Draper, near the door, had gone completely still. Garrett, on the stool, had half risen. He was looking at Gideon. Waiting, Gideon's eyes didn't go to his men. They stayed on her. Something shifted in them. Not fear, not anger. Something older than either of those things. Something that lived below them. He had seen a lot of people do dangerous things. He could usually tell the difference between a person doing something dangerous because they were scared and a person doing something dangerous because they had already calculated it. He had met very few people in the second category. They were the ones you had to pay attention to. This was the second category. "You've done this before," he said. His voice was the same, low. Unhurried, "You hold that like someone taught you." Someone who knew what they were doing. She said nothing. "Your grandmother?" He didn't know why he said that. He had no information that would lead him to that guess. But the knife was old, the handle was old, and the way she held it had a particular quality that usually came from being taught young by someone who learned when tools were tools rather than statements. Her eyes moved just slightly. The smallest adjustment. He had guessed right. He took one step back. Not a retreat. The geometry of it was important to him, and he was aware of that in a background sort of way, the way a person is aware of an old injury when the weather changes. He stepped back because the blade was against his throat, and he was choosing to move away from it. "There is a difference. Tell Loretta." He said, "She has 12 days. He turned around. He walked to the door. His men fell in behind him. Cole Draper last, the way he had been first in. Cole glanced back once, at Darly, not with hostility, with something more complicated. The door swung shut. The bell rang once. Outside, the engines started up one by one, then all together. The sound moved down Main Street and faded east. Darly lowered the knife. She held it at her side for a moment. Then she put it back in the sheath. Loretta, behind the counter, had not moved. She was still holding the coffee pot. Her knuckles were white around the handle. "Darly," she said, "I know. That man. I know." Darly picked up her cloth and went back to wiping the counter. Left to right. Folding after each pass, Loretta set the coffee pot down. She looked at the girl. She looked at the door. She looked at the girl again. 66 years of keeping this diner, this building, this corner of Dusty Creek. 66 years of watching things change and not change. Of knowing things she had not said. She thought of Vera. She always thought of Vera. "Go home when you're done," she said. Her voice was quieter now. "Lock your door tonight." The property was 7 acres. Gideon had bought it in 2006 with money that was partly legitimate and partly not, which described most financial transactions he had been part of in those years. He had put up the fence himself. He had rebuilt the barn roof himself. He had done the plumbing on the house himself, badly at first, then better. He was good with his hands. He had always been good with his hands. That was the thing about Gideon Cross that people who only saw the cut and the scar and the patch didn't understand. He had been a mechanic before he was anything else. He had spent the first years of his adult life with grease under his fingernails and a genuine satisfaction in the act of making broken things work. There was a purity to that work that he had never fully stopped missing. The ranch had a small house, a large barn, and a covered lean to where he kept 2 of his bikes and a 1971 Ford pickup that he drove when he didn't want to be seen riding. He had a dog, a large mixed-breed animal named Tuesday, who he had found on the road outside Odessa in 2019, and who now lived on the porch and guarded the property with the particular ferocity of an animal that had once been lost and deeply did not want to be lost again. He sat on the porch now with a glass of water, not whiskey. He had made that change 4 years ago, and he made it again every night when he chose the water. Tuesday was at his feet. The stars out here were extraordinary. Away from the light of the highway, away from the glow of Midland to the east, the sky over his property looked the way it probably looked before electricity. Layers and layers of stars, the Milky Way visible as a pale smear across the center, the whole thing so large and indifferent that it had a calming effect on him that he had never been able to explain to anyone. He thought about the girl, Darly. He had not asked her last name. He knew she worked at Harlan's. He had been in the diner before, years back, when Loretta had still thought cooperation was possible. He had a general picture of the people in Dusty Creek, the way a man in his position developed a general picture of a territory over time. Young woman worked the counter. He hadn't particularly noticed her. He noticed her now. It wasn't the knife itself. He had had weapons pointed at him before. He had had weapons make contact before. The scar on his jaw was testament to that. The physical reality of a blade didn't frighten him. He had spent enough time in rooms where danger was present. That fear had metabolized into something more like attentiveness. What stayed with him was the quality of her stillness, the way she had held the knife. He had told her she held it like someone taught her. That was true. But what he had been less willing to say out loud in front of his men, in a fluorescent-lit diner at 9:30 on a Tuesday night, was the fuller version of that observation. She held it like someone who had thought about when they would use it. Not obsessively, not with violence in them waiting to get out, but the way a person holds a thing that they have decided is there for a reason. A practical decision made some years ago and arrived at from experience. That was rare. Gideon rubbed his jaw, the right side away from the scar. Tuesday lifted his head, checked the horizon for threats, found none, and put his head back down. He thought about the 12-day timeline. Victor Aldridge's development project had been described to Gideon in broad terms. A mixed-use commercial and residential development, anchor retail, the kind of thing that would bring jobs and residents and tax revenue to a dying section of West Texas. That was the version that had been presented to the town council. The version Aldridge had presented to Gideon was more specific. The chapter would handle the property acquisition side, the persuasion side, the enforcement side. In exchange, a percentage of the development's first 3 years of income would flow through a shell company in Odessa into accounts that Gideon controlled. He had agreed. He had agreed because the chapter needed income, because Aldridge had come with good legal cover and a plausible story, and because Gideon was, at bottom, a practical man who had learned to recognize which way the current was running. But tonight, sitting on the porch with the stars overhead and a glass of water in his hand, he was thinking about the way Loretta Fitch's knuckles had gone white around the coffee pot. He was thinking about the diner being open since 1961. He was thinking that he was 62 years old and tired in a specific way that he had not been able to name until recently. It was not physical tiredness. It was the tiredness of a man who has done the same thing for a very long time and has run out of new ways to feel about it. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Marsh Kinney. He picked up. "You heard," Gideon said. "Cole called me." Marsh's voice was graveled, unhurried, the voice of a man in his late 60s who had seen enough things that nothing came out of his mouth with excess weight. "He said a girl put a knife to your throat in Harlan's diner. That's accurate." A pause. "You're not dead," Marsh said. "I'm not dead." So she changed her mind. She made her point. Another pause. "Longer? What kind of point?" Marsh asked. Gideon looked at the stars. "The kind you don't forget," he said. Marsh Kinney lived on 20 acres south of Gideon's property. He had been a Hells Angels member from 1979 to 1995. He had left cleanly, which was unusual because he had done enough for the club over 16 years that the departure had been handled as a retirement rather than a defection. He had not traded information. He had not caused problems. He had simply said, at the age of 47, that he was done, and the men who ran things at that time had respected that because he had earned the right to say it. He raised quarter horses now. He made decent money at it. He and Gideon had been in the chapter together in the early 90s. They had the particular friendship of two people who had been tested in the same circumstances and had come out of it knowing things about each other that they had never had to say out loud. Marsh was the only person Gideon talked to honestly, not completely honestly. There were things Gideon did not say to anyone, but to the degree that Gideon was honest with another human being in his life, it was Marsh. The conversation on the phone lasted 23 minutes. Gideon described the diner in more detail than he had planned to. The layout, the men, Loretta at the register, the girl wiping the counter. He found himself describing the way she had placed the flat of the blade against his throat rather than the edge. "A deliberate choice," he said. She was making a statement, not a threat. Marsh was quiet for a moment. "That's a distinction," he said. "Yeah, most people in that situation go edge first and think about it later. She thought about it before." "What do you know about her?" "Works at the diner. Been there about 4 years." "I don't have much beyond that." "You want much beyond that?" Gideon considered the question. It was a real question, the way Marsh's questions usually were, I want to know why she's in Dusty Creek, Gideon said. Woman her age, that place. There's nothing there for someone that age. She's not from there. I'd know if she were from there. So she came for something. That's what I think. Then find out what, Marsh said. Before somebody else does. Dusty Creek got its name from the seasonal creek that ran along the eastern edge of town. In wet years, the creek ran for 6 weeks in spring. In dry years, which were most years, it was a bed of cracked pale clay with the occasional puddle. The town had been named for a condition that was mostly imaginary. There was a metaphor in that, Loretta had always thought. A whole town built around the idea of water. She opened the diner at 7 as she always did. She had slept badly. She had lain in her bed on the second floor. She lived above the diner, had lived there for 40 years, and looked at the ceiling and thought about the things she had kept to herself. The number of them, the weight of them, the way a secret calcifies over time into something that feels less like a choice you made and more like a geological feature of your life. Permanent, load-bearing. Remove it, and the structure above it shifts. She had a particular secret that she had been carrying for 23 years. She was getting tired of carrying it. Darly came in at 7:15. She was early. Her shift didn't start until 7:30. She hung up her jacket, tied on her apron, and poured herself a coffee without asking, which was something Loretta had told her she could do on her first week, and which Darly had accepted as a standing arrangement. They worked the breakfast rush in the comfortable rhythm of two people who had been doing the same job together long enough to move around each other without speaking. 6 regulars in before 8, 2 tables of highway workers. A family passing through, eastbound, with 3 kids who ate slowly and a father who left a good tip. At 9:15 the rush was over. Darly was restocking the condiment station. Loretta was at the register. He knew. Darly said. Loretta looked up. The man last night. Cross. Darly didn't look up from the ketchup bottles she was organizing. He knew I wasn't from here. He knew I hadn't been here long. And he guessed about my grandmother. He guessed about your grandmother. He asked if she taught me to use the knife. A pause. He was right. Loretta was quiet. How would he know that? Darly asked. He wouldn't, he guessed. Why would he guess that specifically? Loretta thought about this, about what it said about Gideon Cross, a man who looked at a young woman holding a knife and thought not about the threat, but about who had taught her, about what that way of seeing said about the person doing the seeing, because he pays attention, she said. That man has been paying attention to people his whole life. It's how he's still standing. Darly finished the ketchup bottles, started on the mustard. Tell me about my mother, she said. The diner was quiet. Outside, a truck went past on Main Street. Then nothing. Loretta had known this was coming. She had known it the way she'd known about the diner. You can see a thing approaching for a long time before it arrives. Darly had been in Dusty Creek for 4 years. She had asked about her mother twice before, both times carefully, both times accepting Loretta's careful non-answers without pushing. But something had changed last night. A line had been crossed in the diner by all 3 of them. And lines that have been crossed don't uncross. Vera Calloway came here in 2001, Loretta said. She said it without preamble. Like reading from a document she had been revising in her head for 2 decades. She was 24. She was running from something. She didn't tell me what it was, not at first. She came in one morning, sat at that stool. Loretta indicated the 3rd stool from the door. And she ordered eggs and she ate them slow, like she hadn't eaten in 2 days. Which I think was true. Darly had stopped working. She turned around, sat on the edge of the counter prep table, both hands in her lap. Loretta kept her voice even. She stayed. Rented a room from Pete Sallow's mother. This was Pete's mother, Eleanor. She rented out a back room till she died in 2005. Vera worked here, same as you. Worked the counter. I liked her. She was private, didn't talk about where she came from. But she was good at the work and she was honest about the things that mattered. What happened to her? She was here for 3 years, then she left. She didn't say goodbye the way I expected her to. She just gave notice, said she had to go. Left her forwarding address as a P.O. box in Del Rio, which was never much of a forwarding address. She was running again, Darly said. I think so. From the same thing? Loretta looked at her. I don't know, she said. And that part, that specific part, was true. What had been chasing Vera she had never fully understood. She had her guesses. She had the things she knew and the things she suspected, and they were different categories. Darly was quiet for a long moment. There's a death certificate, she said. Highway accident, Del Rio, 2004. I've had it since I was 20. A social worker found it for me. She paused. The accident report doesn't make sense. The damage pattern on the car doesn't match the official cause. Loretta went very still. Where did you learn to read accident reports? She asked. Library, internet. You can find out how to learn most things if you're patient enough. Loretta looked at her, at this girl she had hired 4 years ago who had shown up with one bag and a kitchen knife and a P.O. box address in Odessa as her previous residence, who had learned to read accident reports in a library, who had not come to Dusty Creek to work a diner, who had come to Dusty Creek because Dusty Creek was where her mother had been. Darly, Loretta said. I know you're not telling me everything, Darly said. There was no accusation in it, just a statement. I'm not pushing, but I need you to know that I'm going to keep looking. Whatever happened to my mother happened in or around this town. It's connected to whoever she was running from. And last night, a man came in here and tried to take this place from you, and I need to know if those two things are connected. Loretta looked at the third stool from the door. She thought about Vera eating eggs slowly because she hadn't eaten in 2 days. She thought about the wait of 23 years. Give me time, she said. Not much. Just some. Darly nodded. She slid off the prep table and went back to the condiment station. Loretta stood at the register and looked at nothing for a while. Outside, the day was getting hot. The chapter house was a repurposed commercial property on the east end of Main Street. It had been a farm supply store in a previous life. The Hells Angels had bought it through a holding company in 2013. It was a functional, unbeautiful building. Metal walls, concrete floor, a long bar along one side that had been installed by the previous chapter president and that Gideon had kept because it was well built. He was there most weekday afternoons. The chapter had 16 full-patch members, a handful of hang-arounds and prospects who came and went. Day to day, the business of running a chapter was not cinematic. It was largely administrative. Supply chains, financial accounts, negotiations with affiliated chapters in Odessa and Lubbock, the management of various commercial interests. Gideon ran it the way he had once run a shop floor, with clear expectations, consistent standards, and a strong disinclination toward chaos. Cole Draper was the one who came to find him. He came in around 2 when the main room was mostly empty. Sat down across from Gideon at the table in the back where Gideon usually did his paperwork. Cole was 30. He had been a full patch for 2 years. He had come up through the chapter the right way. Prospect for 10 months, no shortcuts, no favoritism. He was a good mechanic, which was a trait Gideon respected at some level that went beyond utility. He had a serious face and a contained manner, and he did not speak unless he had something to say. Gideon waited. I looked into her, Cole said. No preamble. No context needed. Darly Calloway, 26, from the Odessa area foster system. Aged out at 18. Moved around for a few years. Odessa, Midland, once briefly to Lubbock, then showed up in Dusty Creek 4 years ago. No family? None on record. Mother deceased, 2004. Father unknown. Cole paused. I did some more digging. Her mother's name was Vera Calloway. Originally from Del Rio, she lived in Dusty Creek from 2001 to 2003. Gideon was quiet. She wasn't a passerby, Cole said. The girl. She came here specifically. She's been asking around. Quietly, not making noise about it, but she's talked to 3 people in town who were here in the early 2000s. She's trying to build a picture of who her mother was and why she left. What else? She's got a file, Cole said, on her phone and on a cheap laptop she keeps at her place. I didn't get into it. I'm not saying I went through her apartment, he added in a tone that indicated he had been close enough to have the option. But she's organized. She's been at this a while. Gideon leaned back in his chair. Outside the chapter house, the afternoon heat was pressing down on the metal roof. You could hear it, a faint metallic ticking as the roof expanded. Her mother left in 2003, Gideon said. She died in 2004. Car accident in Del Rio, that's the official record. You're saying something about the official record. Cole put a folder on the table. Inside was a printout. I pulled the accident report. Old county filing took me a couple hours to find. He turned the folder so Gideon could read it. The impact pattern on the vehicle doesn't match a single car rollover. There are contact points on the driver's side that aren't consistent with the road surface. Gideon read the printout. He read it slowly. Who filed this report, he asked. Deputy out of Valverde County. He retired in 2009. I haven't tracked him down yet. Don't, Gideon said, immediately. Flat Cole looked at him. Don't track him down, Gideon said again. A pause. You know something about this, Cole said. It was not an accusation. Cole Draper was not the kind of person who accused. He stated things with the precision of someone who had learned that stating things clearly was the most efficient way to get to truth. Gideon closed the folder. He placed his hand on top of it. He looked at Cole Draper's serious, contained face. The face of a 30-year-old man who had grown up, as Gideon understood it, without a father, who had joined this chapter 2 years ago, with his references in order and his work ethic intact, and no personal history of violence, which was notable for someone coming up through this world. He knew the name Draper. He had known it for a long time. He had not permitted himself to put it together until this moment. "How long have you been in Dusty Creek?" Gideon asked. "I came up from San Angelo 3 years ago. What brought you here?" The question sat in the air. Cole looked at him, straight, clear, looking for something, he said. "Same as most people who end up in a town like this." The afternoon ticked on the metal roof. Gideon said nothing else. He kept his hand on the folder. Victor Aldridge's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building in downtown Midland. It was the kind of office that communicated a specific message. The furniture was expensive but not ostentatious. Dark wood, clean lines. The view was of the Permian Basin flatlands stretching west, which in the late afternoon light looked almost beautiful. Almost Aldridge was 54. Medium height, medium build, the kind of unremarkable physical presence that wealthy men sometimes cultivated deliberately because it made people underestimate the amount of force they could bring to bear. He had sandy hair going gray at the temples. He wore well-fitting clothes. He had the particular ease of a man who had not heard no from an important person in a very long time. He stood at the window when Gideon came in. This was deliberate. Gideon recognized it as deliberate. He had been in enough rooms to know the stagecraft of power. "Sit down," Aldridge said, without turning. "I'll stand," Gideon said. A beat. Then Aldridge turned. He looked at Gideon with the expression of a man making a small mental note. "There was an incident at the diner last night," he said. "I was there. I heard it didn't go as planned. It went as it went." Aldridge moved to his desk. He sat. He picked up a pen and held it without writing anything, a habit Gideon had noticed before. The pen as a prop. Something to do with the hands while the mind worked. "The diner is the last property on the block," Aldridge said. "I've been patient. I've given you a reasonable timeline. I need that block clear. You'll have it. The deadline is 12 days from yesterday. I know what the deadline is." "I said it, then there's no issue," Aldridge said. He said it pleasantly. The pleasantness was the version of his voice that Gideon had learned to pay more attention to than the harder version. The hard voice was direct. The pleasant voice meant something was being covered. "There's something else," Gideon said. Aldridge waited. "A woman who works at the diner, Darly Calloway. She's been looking into a 2004 accident in Del Rio. A woman named Vera Calloway." The pen in Aldridge's hand was still a second. "2. What's her interest?" Aldridge asked. "Her mother," Gideon said. Silence. "She's been in Dusty Creek 4 years, Gideon continued. "Came here specifically. She's methodical. She's been building a file." He paused. "I'm telling you because if there's something in that 2004 accident that connects back to this project, I need to know." Aldridge's face was still pleasant, still easy, still unconcerned. That was wrong. A man who was genuinely unconcerned would have asked questions. He would have said, "Who is this woman? What kind of accident? Why does it matter?" A man who was hearing new information processed it. Aldridge had not processed it. He had received it. "I'll look into it," Aldridge said. "In the meantime, the diner. 12 days, we said that already. Then we're done here." Gideon looked at him for a moment longer than necessary. He turned and walked to the door. Behind him, he heard the sound of Aldridge picking up his phone, not to make a call. The kind of quick movement that meant sending a message, immediate. Before Gideon had even cleared the door, Gideon did not let his pace change. He walked to the elevator. He pressed the button. He stood and waited, looking at the closed elevator doors and the dull reflection of himself in the metal. 62 years old, iron gray hair, a scar on his jaw from a parking lot in Amarillo. He thought about the way Aldridge had not processed new information. He thought about a 2004 accident report with an inconsistent impact pattern. He thought about a 26-year-old woman who had taught herself to read accident reports in a library, who had been in Dusty Creek for 4 years building a file, who held a knife the way her grandmother had taught her, who had looked him in the face without looking away. The elevator opened. He stepped in. He hit the button for the lobby. The doors closed. He stood alone in the small mirrored box as it descended, and he looked at himself. And for the first time in a long time, he thought a specific thought about a specific question. The thought was this. He had spent 34 years being careful about the right things and careless about the wrong things. He had been careful about hierarchy and about money and about the maintenance of his position. He had been careless about other things, about the questions he had not asked, about the things he had seen and filed away, and decided were not his to pursue. He was a practical man. That was what he told himself. That was the frame. But there was another word for it. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. He walked out into the Midland heat. He got on his bike. He sat there for a moment before starting it, his hands on the grips. The West Texas afternoon pressing down. Somewhere to the northwest, Dusty Creek was settling into the early evening, the light going amber, the highway quieting. He started the engine. He did not drive toward the chapter house. He drove west. He had something to ask Marsh Kinney. The road to Marsh's property wasn't marked. No sign. No mailbox number. Just a cattle gate set back 40 feet from the highway and a dirt track that wound through scrub mesquite for a quarter-mile before opening up into the property. Gideon had driven it enough times that he knew where the track went soft in the middle. A low spot that collected moisture in wet weather and stayed loose longer than the surrounding ground. He steered around it without thinking. Muscle memory. Marsh was in the barn when Gideon pulled up. He was working on a horse's rear left hoof. A big gray quarter horse. Patient and still, one leg lifted, Marsh bent over it with a hoof pick. He didn't look up when he heard the bike. "Water's in the cooler," he said. Gideon cut the engine, got off, walked to the cooler by the barn door, pulled out a bottle and sat on the fence rail. He waited. Marsh finished the hoof, set the leg down gently, straightened up with the careful movement of a 68-year-old man who had spent decades bending over in ways his spine was no longer enthusiastic about. He patted the horse's flank twice. The horse moved off. Marsh came and stood by the fence. He didn't sit. He looked at Gideon the way he always looked at him, like he was reading something written in small print. "You went to see Aldridge," he said. "How did you know that?" "Because you drove west to come here, which means you came from Midland, which means you went east first." Gideon looked at the bottle in his hand. "I told him about the girl." "About what Cole found? Why?" "Because I needed to see how he'd react." Marsh was quiet. The evening light was coming in low and sideways across the property. One of the horses in the far pasture moved along the fence line, slow and purposeful. The barn smelled of hay and oil and animal warmth. "How did he react?" Marsh asked. "He didn't." "Meaning?" "Meaning he received the information, not processed it. Received it, like he already knew what I was telling him." Marsh picked up his own water bottle, took a drink. Said nothing for a moment. "Tell me about the Calloway woman," he said. "The mother, Vera Calloway. Lived here 2001 to 2003. Died in Del Rio in 2004. Accident report doesn't match the physical evidence." "What year did Aldridge first come to you about the Dusty Creek project?" Gideon thought about this. 2021. He said he'd been watching the land values for a decade. A decade back from 2021 is 2011. "I can do the math, Marsh. I'm not questioning your math. I'm asking you to sit with the timeline." Marsh set his water down on the fence post. "Aldridge has been watching Dusty Creek since 2011. Vera Calloway died in 2004. The daughter shows up in Dusty Creek in 2021, the same year Aldridge made first contact. Gideon heard it. He heard it the way you hear a sound in a quiet house. You're not sure if it's real, but your body responds before your mind catches up. "You think the two things are connected," he said. "I think you think the two things are connected," Marsh said. "And I think you drove 40 minutes to talk to me instead of going back to the chapter house. Because you needed someone to tell you that your instincts are worth following." Gideon was quiet for a moment. "There's something else," he said. Marsh waited. "Cole Draper. I think I know who his father was." The barn was very still. "Harwick Draper," Gideon said. Marsh looked at him. "Long, steady." "The land dispute," he said. 2009, yeah, Cole was. About 10, Gideon said. "If the timing's right." Marsh turned away, looked out at the pasture. "The horses. The low-angled light. Does he know who you are to that?" Marsh asked. "I don't know what he knows. Does he know you were there?" "I don't know that either. But you were." It wasn't a question. Marsh knew the answer. He had known for 15 years, and he had never asked directly. That had been an arrangement between them, wordless and durable. Gideon did not speak of certain things. Marsh did not ask about certain things. It had kept their friendship intact through years when it might otherwise have fractured. But tonight the wordless arrangement felt different. Tonight it felt like a wall that was starting to show cracks. "I was there," Gideon said. "That was all he said." Marsh nodded slowly. "Then you've got two people in your life," Marsh said, "who are both looking for the same kind of answer. And they're both in the same small town. And the man who's been using you like a chess piece has been watching that town for the same length of time. One of those people has been looking." He turned back to Gideon. "That's a lot of coincidence for one July." Gideon drank the rest of his water. He looked at the darkening sky above the pasture. He thought about what it felt like to be 62 years old and to finally ask a question you should have asked 15 years earlier. "What do I do with it?" he said. Marsh picked up his hoof pick, turned it in his hands. "You could keep doing what you've been doing," he said. "Finish the job for Aldridge. The girl leaves or she doesn't. The diner sells or it doesn't. The chapter gets its money. You go on or you figure out what actually happened to Vera Calloway in 2004. Marsh set the hoof pick down. "And you figure out what you're going to do about the fact that you might already know." The last of the evening light faded. Somewhere out in the pasture, the gray quarter horse made a sound. Low and unhurried, Gideon stood up from the fence rail. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said. "I know," Marsh said. The diner was quiet in the space between the early rush and the mid-morning, 2 tables occupied. A retired couple from the highway passing through. Pete Sallow at the counter, coffee only, reading a newspaper folded to the crossword. Gideon came in alone, no cut. Dark jeans, boots, a plain gray work shirt. He looked like a large, weathered man who had spent his life outdoors. Which was accurate enough. Darly saw him come in. She kept her expression level. She finished pouring coffee for Pete. She set the pot down. She walked to the end of the counter where Gideon had taken a stool. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please." She poured it, set it in front of him, started to move away. "I need to talk to you," he said. She stopped, turned back. She looked at him the same way she always looked at him. That steady, undeceived look. He was learning to read it better now. It wasn't hostility. It wasn't performance. It was the look of a person who had learned early that faces lie and had decided to see past the face to the information beneath. "About what?" she said. "About why you came to Dusty Creek." A beat. "I work here," she said. "You came here to work here because you came here," he said. "That's not the same thing." She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked past him at Pete Sallow, who was deep in 14 across and not paying attention to anything else in the room. "My break is at 9, she said. "There's a table in the back. I'll wait," he said. They sat across from each other at the small table in the back corner. Loretta, behind the counter, kept her eyes on her work. But Gideon could feel her attention, the particular quality of someone listening without appearing to listen. Darly had her coffee. She held it in both hands, elbows on the table. She looked at him. "You've been asking about my mother," Gideon said. "Vera Calloway. She lived here from 2001 to 2003. Then she went to Del Rio. Then she died, that's what the record says. The accident report doesn't fit the physical evidence." She watched him. "You know that already," he said. "Cole told me you've been looking at it." "Cole told you?" "He's thorough. He went through my things. He assessed the situation." "It's what he does," Gideon paused. "I'm not defending it. I'm telling you what I know." Darly set her coffee down. She looked at him with a directness that 3 days ago would have registered on him differently. It still registered. "But differently now. What do you want?" she asked. "You come in here without the cut, without the men. You want something. I want to know what's in your file. Why?" "Because I think it connects to something I should have looked at a long time ago." He paused. The next part came out more plainly than he had planned. "And because I think someone is using both of us. And I don't like being used." She studied him. The back of the diner was quiet. The hum of the refrigerator unit. The distant sound of Pete turning a newspaper page. "My mother came to Dusty Creek running from something," Darly said. "She stayed 2 years. She left. 8 months after she left, she was dead. The accident report was filed by a county deputy. The impact pattern on the car suggests contact from another vehicle. There was no other vehicle in the official report." She paused. "Someone ran her off the road. You're certain?" "I've spent 4 years getting certain." He was quiet. "What was she running from when she came here?" he asked. "That's what I came to find out." She looked at him. "I think Loretta knows." "Does Loretta know you think that?" "I told her 3 days ago." She said to give her time. Gideon turned his coffee cup in his hands. A habit. The same motion he made on the porch at night. Something to do while he thought. "I'm going to ask you something," he said. "And I need you to hear it as a straight question, not as a threat." She waited. "Did anyone point you toward Dusty Creek, or did you find it on your own?" She looked at him. "I found it," she said, "through my mother's old address records. A foster care worker helped me access them when I was 20. She paused. "Why?" "Because you showed up in this town the same year a man out of Midland first came to me about a development project." "Same year." He watched her face. "That's a coincidence I'm having trouble accepting." She was quiet for a long moment. "Who is the man out of Midland?" she asked. "Victor Aldridge." The name meant nothing to her. He watched it mean nothing to her, and believed the nothing. "He's a real estate developer," Gideon said. "He's been buying up Dusty Creek land." The diner is the last holdout on this block. He stopped. I've been the one doing the persuading for him. He said it plainly. She deserved the plain version. You've been pressuring Loretta, she said. Yes, on behalf of this man. Yes. Why? Because he pays well, and because I didn't ask questions I should have asked. He looked at his coffee. I'm a practical man. I've told myself that long enough that I started to confuse it for a virtue. She looked at him for a long moment. Outside, a truck moved past on Main Street. The refrigerator hummed. My mother knew someone in this town, Darly said. Not just Loretta. Someone else. I haven't found out who yet. What makes you think so? Because she stayed 2 years. She was running. People who are running don't usually stay 2 years in one place unless they have a reason to stay. Gideon thought about this. He thought about 2001. He had been in this chapter then. He had been moving through Dusty Creek regularly. He had been 39 years old. He thought about a thing he had not let himself think about for a very long time. He did not say it. Not yet. Give me a few days, he said. Instead, she looked at him. I'm not asking you to trust me, he said. I'm asking you to give me a few days before you do anything that makes more noise. And what are you going to do with a few days? Talk to some people. Look at some things I should have looked at a long time ago. She was quiet then. You said someone is using both of us. She held his gaze. How is someone using me? I came here on my own. That's what you were supposed to think, he said. He stood up. He put money on the table for the coffee. He walked out. 9 days until the deadline, then 8, then 7. The heat held. The sky over Dusty Creek stayed white and hard-edged in the middle of the day and went that particular deep blue of high desert evenings that made the town look, briefly, almost painterly. Gideon moved through those days differently than he had moved through the days before. He still ran the chapter. He still handled the daily administration, the calls with the Odessa and Lubbock chapters, the financial paperwork that was the unglamorous substrate of the whole operation. He still rode the highway in the early mornings, the way he had done for 30 years, because the morning ride was the one thing in his life that had remained uncomplicated. But underneath all of it, something had shifted. He was paying attention to different things. He went back to the documents Aldridge had given him when the project was first proposed. The land surveys, the legal filings, the timeline of purchases. He had reviewed them before, 2 years ago, and they had looked clean. Now he read them again slower, with the specific question Cole had planted in the back of his mind. Who in this town had contact with Vera Calloway? He asked quietly. Not through the chapter, through the older network. The people in Dusty Creek who had been here long enough to remember the early 2000s. A retired pharmacist, Eleanor Sallow's neighbor, who was now in her 70s and had an exceptional memory. A man named Rusk, who ran the hardware store before selling to Aldridge and who had known everyone in town for 40 years. He learned things Vera Calloway had been liked. Quiet, private, hard-working. Had worked at the diner, had sung in a church choir briefly, had kept to herself mostly. She had one close friend in town beyond Loretta, a woman named Janet Purcell, who had moved to Amarillo in 2005. He tracked down Janet Purcell Pond Call, 7 minutes. Janet was now 61, taught elementary school in Amarillo. She remembered Vera clearly. She said 2 things that Gideon wrote down on the back of a gas receipt and put in his shirt pocket. The first thing, Vera had told Janet in late 2002 that she had met someone in Dusty Creek. Someone she hadn't expected to meet. Someone she described as complicated and worth it, which Janet said at the time had sounded contradictory to her, but that Vera had said with certainty. The second thing, in early 2003, Vera had told Janet she was leaving. She said the situation had become dangerous. She did not say who the danger came from. She said only, the person I trusted here can't protect me from what's coming, and I can't ask them to. Gideon sat with those 2 things for a long time. Cole found him in the chapter house on day 6. He came in with the direct manner he always had. Sat down, no preamble. Aldridge has a man watching the diner, he said. Gideon looked up. Since when? At least 4 days. I noticed him day before yesterday. White Chevy Colorado, parks on Dexter Street, has a line of sight to the diner entrance. Changes out every 8 hours. You're sure he's Aldridge's? I ran the plates. Registered to a company called Permian Basin Security Solutions. I looked them up. They're a private security and investigation firm based in Midland. Their biggest listed client is Aldridge Development Group. Gideon set down his pen. He's watching Darly, he said. He's watching the diner, Cole said. Which means he's watching Darly and Loretta and anyone who comes and goes, including Gideon. He had been in the diner twice in the past week. Aldridge would know. He thought about the phone. Aldridge had picked up before Gideon had cleared the door of his office in Midland. He knew, Gideon said. When I told him about the girl. He already knew. Cole said nothing. He's been watching her, Gideon said. Maybe the whole time. He thought about the timeline, the same year. Maybe since before she got here. The chapter house was quiet around them. Cole turned his coffee cup in his hands. There's something I need to tell you, Cole said. He said it in a particular tone, not the information delivery tone he usually used. Something different. Something that cost more. Gideon waited. My father's name was Harwick Draper, Cole said. He said it straight. No throat clearing, no buildup. He died in 2009. There was a land dispute outside San Angelo. He was on the wrong side of it, or the right side of it, depending on how you look at it. The official story was an accident. Cole paused. I was 10. My mother told me what the official story was. I believed her until I was about 22. Then I started looking. Gideon held very still. I know you were there, Cole said, at the property. In 2009, I've known for about a year. The weight of it sat in the room. This was the moment. Gideon recognized it the way a person recognizes a door they've been walking past for a long time. The door that's been there, that's been waiting. Yes, Gideon said. I was there. Did you know what was going to happen? No. Did you do anything to stop it? A breath. No, he said. I didn't. Cole looked at him. His face was the serious, contained face it always was. But beneath the containment, something older and rawer was present. Gideon could see it the way he'd always been able to see the thing beneath the face. Why not? Cole asked. Because I made a calculation, Gideon said. The wrong one. I decided it wasn't my situation to enter. I decided the outcome wasn't my responsibility. He paused. I've made that calculation more than once in my life. I've called it being practical. It's been the most expensive habit I have. Cole looked at the table. A long moment. I didn't come here to make you pay for it, he said. I know. I came here because I wanted to understand it. The whole picture. What happened and why. He looked up. My father wasn't a saint, I know that. But he deserved better than what he got. Yes, Gideon said. He did. The afternoon pressed down on the metal roof. I'm going to tell you something, Gideon said. And then I'm going to ask you something. Cole waited. I think the same man who had your father's situation handled is connected to what's happening to the Calloway woman. To her mother in 2004. To this project, he paused. Victor Aldridge has been operating in this region for a long time, moving pieces, using people, getting outcomes he wants, and making them look like accidents or natural results. Cole's jaw was tight. And you've been working for him, he said. Not an accusation. A statement. I have been, Gideon said. I didn't know the full scope of it. I'm not going to tell you I had no idea what kind of man he was, because that would be a lie. I knew enough. I just decided that knowing enough wasn't the same as being responsible for it. But now you're changing that calculation. I'm trying to. Cole looked at him for a long moment. What are you asking me, he said. I'm asking if you're in or out, Gideon said, because I'm going to need someone I can trust. And I think you came here partly because you needed to find out if I was worth trusting. The chapter house was very quiet. Then Cole Draper said, What do you need? 4 days until the deadline. Loretta called Gideon. He had not expected that. He had given her his number 2 years ago as a practical matter and had not thought she would ever use it. She called at 6:15, after the diner closed, her voice carrying the particular flatness of someone who has made a decision and is not going back from it. Come to the diner, she said. Alone, he came. The diner was locked. She let him in through the side door and led him to the back table. 2 coffees already poured. She sat down. He sat across from her. She looked at him the way people look at someone they have been trying to decide whether to trust for a very long time. Vera Calloway, she said. You knew her? He could have denied it. He didn't. Yes, he said. Loretta's hands were flat on the table. She looked at them. Then at him. The person she told Janet Purcell about, he said. The person worth it and complicated. Loretta looked up. You talked to Janet. Last week. How did you find? She stopped, let out a slow breath. You've been doing what Darly's been doing. Looking? I have. She was quiet for a moment. The diner was dark, except for the light above the back table. Outside, Main Street was empty. A car moved past. Its headlights swept through the front windows. She stayed because of you, Loretta said. Vera? She came here running from something, and then she stayed because she met you, and then she left because she realized that whatever was following her was going to follow her here, and she couldn't put you in that. He said nothing. She loved you, Loretta said. The way she talked about you. When she talked, which wasn't often, and never by name, she looked at him. She said, He has responsibilities I can't ask him to put down. I always figured she meant the club. She was right, he said. She was protecting you, Loretta said. And you didn't know she was doing it. The silence in the diner was deep and particular. Gideon looked at his coffee. He had not touched it. She went to Del Rio, he said. She died in 2004. Yes. Did she know she was in danger when she left? Loretta's jaw tightened. She knew something was wrong. I didn't know enough to know how wrong. She paused. I've been asking myself for 20 years if I could have done something. If I should have pushed harder. Asked more questions. She looked at him. The answer is yes. I should have. So should I, Gideon said. They sat with that. There's something else, Loretta said. She reached into the pocket of her apron and placed a folded piece of paper on the table. She pushed it toward him. He opened it. It was a photocopy of an old business card. The card had a name on it and a phone number. Below the name, a company, Permian Basin Acquisitions, LLC. Midland TX. The name on the card was not Victor Aldridge, but the company was one of 3 shell companies Gideon had recently traced in the land records back to Aldridge's network. The date written in pen on the back of the photocopy, in Loretta's handwriting. September 2003. This was left at the diner, Loretta said. A man came in asking about Vera, saying he was an old friend, trying to reconnect. Vera had already left by then. He left this card in case I heard from her. She paused. I kept it because something about it felt wrong. You never told anyone, Gideon said. I didn't know who to tell. She looked at him. I'm telling you now. He walked out of the diner at 7:45. The evening air was warm. The streetlights on Main Street made pale circles on the pavement. He stood on the sidewalk. A company traced back to Aldridge. A man asking about Vera in September 2003. Vera already gone, dead in Del Rio 7 months later. Aldridge had been looking for her. He had found her. Gideon's phone buzzed. Cole. He picked up. The Chevy Colorado on Dexter, Cole said. It's gone. Since when? About an hour ago. New vehicle took its place. Black Ford. Different plates. But there's something else. A pause. Darly's not at her apartment, Cole said. I went by. Her car is there. Her lights are off. She's not answering. Gideon was already moving toward his bike. Where? He said. I don't know yet. I'm working on it. Work faster. He started the engine. He found her through Cole, who found her through a chapter member who worked a night shift at a fuel depot 2 miles east of town. The member had seen a black Ford and a white woman being walked, not forced but not free, into a storage unit facility off Route 9. Gideon knew the facility. Aldridge's company held the lease on it. He had known that and not thought about it. He called Marsh on the way. He moved on her. Gideon said, how long? Unknown. Could be an hour. Is she hurt? I don't know. What's your plan? I'm working on it. That's not a plan, I know. He rode. The Route 9 storage facility was a long, low building set back from the highway behind a chain-link fence. 12 units, roll-up doors, outdoor lighting that left most of the lot in shadow. The black Ford was parked at the far end. He did not go in immediately. He sat on his bike at the edge of the property and thought. This was the discipline Marsh had taught him a long time ago in a different context. The hardest thing in a dangerous situation is to stop, to not move until you understand the shape of what you're entering. Most bad outcomes in difficult situations come from people moving before they've fully read the room. He read the lot, one vehicle. One man visible near the Ford, leaning against the hood, phone in hand. At least one person inside one of the units, possibly more. The unit at the far right end had a sliver of light under the roll-up door. He had no weapon on him. He rarely carried one anymore. What he had was 34 years of being the most formidable presence in most rooms he entered. He had the particular authority of a man who had never needed to prove it twice. And he had the fact, which Aldridge's man near the Ford would know, that he was the chapter president, that moving against him had consequences that moving against most people did not. He got off the bike. He walked across the lot. The man by the Ford straightened up when he saw who it was. Mr. Cross. Open the unit, Gideon said. I have instructions. I know you have instructions. He stopped in front of the man, looked at him. Open the unit. The man made a calculation. Gideon watched him make it. Weigh the instructions against the person standing in front of him. It took 4 seconds. He opened the unit. Darly was inside. She was seated on a metal folding chair. Her wrists were zip-tied to the chair arms. There was a second man inside, bigger, standing, who looked at Gideon with surprise that he masked quickly. Darly looked at Gideon. Her expression was not panic. It was the same expression she always had. Reading the room. Assessing. You took your time, she said. I had to find you first. He looked at the second man. Cut her loose, he said. I know what you have, Gideon said. Cut her loose. And then you and your partner outside are going to go back to Midland and tell Aldridge that I handled it. The man looked at him. He's not going to like that. I know he's not, Gideon said. Cut her loose. The zip ties came off. Darly stood. She moved her wrists, checking the circulation. She looked at Gideon with that steady look. He turned to go. "The knife," she said. He turned back. The second man was holding the knife. Darly's knife, the walnut handle, the carved pattern. He had taken it from her when he brought her in. Gideon looked at the man. The man handed the knife over. Darly took it, slid it into the sheath at the back of her waistband. She did it without ceremony. They walked out. Outside, under the sparse lot lighting, they stood by his bike. Neither of them spoke immediately. The two men from the storage unit drove away in the Ford without looking back. The highway was quiet. The sky was enormous and dark above them, punched through with stars. "He's escalating," Darly said. "Yes, he wants me gone. He wants you quiet," Gideon said. "There's a difference. Gone is easier. Quiet is more permanent." She looked at him. "He had my mother killed," she said. "It wasn't a question, I think so. You think so, or you know?" He was quiet for a moment. "I know more than I did a week ago," he said. "Not everything yet." "What do you know?" He told her about the business card, about Permian Basin acquisitions and the man who came to the diner in September 2003, a month after her mother had left, about the shell company traced back to Aldridge, about Janet Purcell and what she had said. She listened without interrupting. When he was done, she was quiet for a moment. Then, "My mother was protecting someone when she left." Janet said that. "Yes," she said, "the person couldn't protect her from what was coming." "Yes." Darly looked at him. He looked back, in the dark lot, with the highway quiet behind them and the stars overhead. The thing that had been accumulating over the past week settled into something neither of them had to name directly. She was 26 years old, and she had been looking for this for 6 years. He was 62, and he had been looking away from it for 20. "What happens now?" she said. "You don't go back to your apartment tonight," he said. "You go to Loretta's. You stay there. And you?" "I go talk to Sheriff Pruitt." A pause. "Dale Pruitt has been in this county for 20 years, she said carefully. "I know. You trust him?" He paused. That pause was longer than she'd expected it to be. "I'm going to find out," he said. He started the bike. She watched him go. She stood in the dark lot for a moment, her hand resting on the knife handle out of habit. She thought about her mother, about a woman who had been 24 years old and running, who had stopped running long enough to love someone complicated and worth it, who had left to protect that person, and who had been found anyway. She thought about what it meant that the person her mother had protected was the same person who had just cut her loose from a metal folding chair. She started walking toward town. The conversation with Sheriff Pruitt lasted 11 minutes. Gideon found him at the station on Dexter, doing paperwork at his desk the way Pruitt spent most evenings. Pruitt was 59, a compact, careful man with a gray mustache, and the habitual stillness of someone who had spent a career in small-town law enforcement, learning to read situations before entering them. They had a functional relationship. Not warm, functional. Pruitt had looked the other way on enough chapter-adjacent situations over the years that the arrangement had its own kind of logic. Gideon had never pushed it too far. Pruitt had never explicitly asked for things he couldn't deny later. It was a West Texas arrangement, not uncommon. Gideon sat down across from him and described what had happened at the storage facility, plainly. Without editorializing, Pruitt listened. His expression during the listening was the thing Gideon was watching. When Gideon finished, Pruitt was quiet for a moment. He turned a pen in his hands. He looked at the desk, then he said, "I'll look into it." Gideon looked at him. "Dale," he said, "a woman was detained without cause in a facility in this county tonight. I said I'll look into it." "That's not Gideon." Pruitt looked up. His voice was flat, not aggressive, flat. "I said I'll look into it. Give me 24 hours. Something in the flatness was wrong, the same quality as Aldridge's pleasantness, the quality of a man receiving information that he already had. Gideon stood up. 24 hours, he said. He walked out. In the parking lot, he sat on his bike and did not start it. He sat there. The night air was warm. The streetlights hummed. He had known Dale Pruitt for 11 years. He had looked the other way. Pruitt had looked the other way. That was the arrangement. But there were degrees of looking the other way, and the flatness in Pruitt's voice had the specific quality of a man who had been told this might happen, who had been prepared for this conversation by someone who knew it was coming. Gideon started the bike. He rode back to his property. He sat on the porch with Tuesday at his feet and looked at the stars. He thought about what Marsh had said, the oil either comes up or it doesn't. A thing is either true or it isn't. He had spent his whole adult life in the space between those two poles. He thought about Vera Calloway, 24 years old in this town, meeting someone complicated and worth it, leaving to protect that person. Found 7 months later on a road outside Del Rio, he thought about what that meant about him, what it said about who he had been, what he owed. Not to the chapter, not to Aldridge, not to his position or his reputation or the accumulated weight of 34 years. To a 26-year-old woman with a knife and her grandmother's carved walnut handle, sitting in a metal folding chair in a storage unit, who had looked at him when he walked in and said, "You took your time." He owed her the truth, all of it. 3 days until the deadline, Gideon didn't sleep. He tried. He lay on top of the bed in his clothes and stared at the ceiling and listened to Tuesday breathe on the porch outside the window. At 4:30 he got up, made coffee, stood at the kitchen counter, and drank it in the dark. At 5:15 he called Marsh. Marsh picked up on the second ring, which meant he hadn't been sleeping either. "Come over," Marsh said. The drive took 12 minutes. The sky was still dark but changing at the eastern edge, that particular deep blue that comes just before color returns to the world. Gideon had always liked this hour, the hour before the day committed to being a day. Marsh was on the porch with coffee when he arrived. They sat for a while, neither of them said anything. That was the ease of long friendship, the ability to be in silence together without the silence meaning something was wrong. Then Gideon said, "Pruitt." Marsh nodded slowly. He had been thinking the same thing. "He's in it," Gideon said. "Since when?" "I don't know. Long enough that he was prepared for the conversation last night. Long enough that he knew I was coming before I sat down." Marsh turned his coffee cup in his hands. "That changes things," he said. "It means there's no play I can make locally, nothing that goes through official channels. Anything I do in this county, Aldridge knows within hours. So you go around the county. That's what I've been thinking." Marsh looked at the horizon. The blue was lightening now. Not dawn yet, but close. "There's a woman," Marsh said. "Federal. She's been building a case on Aldridge for 2 years, independent of local law enforcement. I know because I gave her 2 documents in 2022 that I should have given her years earlier." He paused. "Her name is Sandra Okafor. She's based in the Dallas field office." Gideon looked at him. "You've been talking to a federal agent," he said. "I've been providing limited documentation to someone who is doing what should have been done a long time ago." Marsh said it without apology. "I did it without telling you because I knew you weren't ready to hear it." Gideon was quiet. "I'm not angry," he said. "I know. I'm thinking about the fact that you've been carrying that for 2 years. I've been carrying a lot of things for a long time," Marsh said. "You're not the only one who's made quiet decisions." The stars were fading now. One by one, the brightest ones held on longest, and then they too went. "Call her," Gideon said. "Already did. An hour ago." Marsh looked at him. "She can be here by tonight?" Gideon nodded. Marsh didn't move. That meant there was more. "What else?" Gideon said. Marsh set his coffee down. He looked at the horizon for a moment, the way he looked at difficult things, not away from them, but sideways first, getting the angle right before looking straight at it. "In 2022, Marsh said, when I first made contact with Okafor, I gave her 2 documents, property filings, shell company records." He paused. "I also gave her something else, something I found in 2021. When Aldridge first approached you about the Dusty Creek project, Gideon was still. He didn't come to you because of the chapter's West Texas reach," Marsh said. "He came to you because he already had leverage. He had the 2009 documentation. Harwick Draper, you being present. The whole picture." He looked at Gideon directly now. "He had it before he ever sat across from you. The development project was never just business. It was the price of him staying quiet." The porch was very still. Gideon looked at his hands. 15 years. He told himself, for 15 years, that he had chosen to work with Aldridge because it made practical sense, because the chapter needed income, because the deal was clean enough on the surface. He had not let himself examine the other thing, the thing underneath. The reason he had agreed without the usual diligence, the reason he had not asked the questions he would have asked anyone else. He had known, not consciously, but known the way you know a tooth is bad before you go to the dentist. The way you know a marriage is over before either person says it. The body knows before the mind will admit it. He had been Aldridge's man for 15 years, and he had called it a business arrangement. "He owned you," Marsh said, quietly, not with cruelty, just clearly. "Yes," Gideon said. "You know that now. I've known it for about 2 weeks. I've been deciding what to do with it." Marsh picked up his coffee. And I'm done being owned." Loretta had a spare room on the 2nd floor. It had a single bed, a window that looked out over the back lot, and a chest of drawers that had belonged to her mother. Darly had slept there, or tried to. She had been awake most of the night with the window open, listening to the town be quiet. Dusty Creek was very quiet at night. That was one of the things she had noticed when she first arrived. Coming from the foster system, from apartments in Odessa and Midland where there was always noise, traffic, neighbors, the particular close quarters sound of people living in proximity, the silence of Dusty Creek at night had felt strange at first. Then it had felt like something else, like space, like room. She had started to think of it as home. She didn't have many things she thought of as home. At 8:45, Loretta knocked and brought coffee. They sat at the small table by the window. "How are your wrists?" Loretta asked. "Fine." They were slightly bruised. She had looked at them in the bathroom mirror and decided they were not worth thinking about. Loretta looked at her. The older woman's face in the morning light was tired but clear. The face of someone who had made a decision overnight and was living with it. "I need to tell you something," Loretta said. "About your mother. About something I've been keeping for 20 years that I should not have kept that long." Darly set down her coffee. She waited. "Vera didn't just love someone in this town," Loretta said. "She told me, in the last week before she left, that she had reason to believe she was in danger from someone connected to the man she was involved with. Not from him directly, from people around him. From the world he moved in." She paused. She said she couldn't tell him because telling him would make him a target too, or would require him to do something she didn't want on his conscience. Darly was quiet. "She protected him," she said. "She protected him," Loretta said. "And it cost her everything." They sat with that. Outside the window, Main Street was beginning its slow morning start. A truck. A dog crossing the road. The hardware store, which was now Aldridge's, had been for 2 years, opening its metal shutters. "Did you know who he was?" Darly asked. "The person she was involved with?" "I suspected," Loretta said. "I didn't know for certain." She never said his name directly. But Dusty Creek is a small town, and the way she talked about him, the words she chose, complicated, worth it, a man with responsibilities he couldn't put down. She looked at Darly. "When Gideon Cross walked into this diner last week," she said, "and you put that knife to his throat. The first thing I thought wasn't about the knife." Darly looked at her. "What did you think?" "I thought, there he is," Loretta said quietly. "After 20 years. There he is." The room was very still. Darly looked out the window at Main Street, at the town her mother had lived in, at the corner where Harlan's Diner had stood since 1961, at the ordinary, worn, unhurried life of a small West Texas town that had been the backdrop to something her mother had loved and lost. "He doesn't know," Darly said. "I don't think he let himself know," Loretta said. "There's a difference." Darly was quiet for a long moment. Then, "He came to get me last night." "He didn't know," Loretta said. "He didn't. He's changing." "Yes. Why now?" Loretta looked at her hands. The hands that had run this diner for 40 years, that had poured coffee for everyone who had ever passed through Dusty Creek, that had held the pieces of this town together when pieces wanted to come apart. "Because you put a knife to his throat," she said, "and you didn't run when he looked at you, and he hasn't been able to figure out why that matters to him. But it does." She paused. "Some people need to be stopped, physically stopped, before they can hear anything." Darly picked up her coffee. "Drank. He's going to tell me something," she said. "Something he hasn't said yet. I can see him getting there." "Yes," Loretta said. "He is. Will I want to hear it?" Loretta thought about this honestly. "No," she said. "But you need to." Gideon spent the morning at the chapter house. He ran the meeting as he always did. Direct, efficient. He assigned work, reviewed accounts, handled a dispute between 2 members about a shared equipment purchase. He acted like a man whose week was ordinary. When the meeting broke up, he kept Cole behind. They went outside, away from the building, stood by the fence line at the back of the property where the scrub began. "Aldridge is going to move before his own deadline," Gideon said. "He doesn't want federal attention. He's going to try to close out the Dusty Creek situation in the next 24 to 48 hours, Cole said. "What does closing it out look like?" "Either the remaining properties sign, or the people who won't sign become a different kind of problem." Cole looked at the scrub. "Loretta," he said, "and Darly, what do we do?" Gideon had thought about this since 5 in the morning. He had turned it the way he turned a mechanical problem, looking for the load-bearing points, the places where the structure could be addressed efficiently. "Aldridge has been operating here for 2 years using this chapter as his tool," he said. "What he hasn't accounted for is the tool deciding it doesn't want to be a tool anymore." Cole looked at him. "The chapter won't move against Aldridge's people directly," Gideon said. "That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking for the chapter to step back, stop being the enforcement mechanism, withdraw the pressure on the properties. You're telling me to go against Aldridge's instructions. I'm telling you, the chapter is going to stop doing Aldridge's work. Effective now, he'll come after the chapter. He'll try. Gideon said it flat. But a man who has been using other people to do his difficult work for 20 years tends to find that when the people stop, he doesn't know how to do it himself. Cole thought about this. And the federal piece? He said. Tonight, Gideon said. That's being handled. Cole nodded. They stood for a moment in the afternoon heat. Can I ask you something? Cole said. Go ahead. Do you regret it? All of it. The whole 30 years. Gideon looked at the scrub, the pale dry grass, the mesquite twisted into its permanent reaching shape. Parts of it, he said. Some things I did in this life that I wouldn't undo. I built something. I gave men who needed structure a place to find it. I've kept people safer than they would have been otherwise. I believe that, and I believe it honestly. He paused. Other parts I regret deeply. And I've done the thing that makes regret worse, which is knowing at the time that I might be choosing wrong. And choosing it anyway. Cole was quiet. Your father was one of those, Gideon said. I'm not going to tell you it was complicated, because that's what people say when they want the word complicated to do work that the word wrong should be doing. Cole looked at the ground. He deserved better, Cole said. The same words as before. Yes, Gideon said. He did, and I can't give him that. I can't give you that. All I can do is not make the same calculation again. The afternoon held them both for a moment. Then Cole said, that's enough for me. It was not forgiveness. Gideon knew that. Cole knew that too. It was something more honest than forgiveness. The acknowledgement that two people can move forward together without the debt between them being erased. Without pretending the weight doesn't exist. It just doesn't stop them from moving. The call came at 4:15. Cole. Short tight. They have Loretta. Gideon was on the bike in 40 seconds. This time was different. Not the storage facility. Cole's voice had said have, not took, which meant they hadn't moved her far. He called Cole back on the road. Where? The diner itself. Two of Aldridge's men walked in through the back during the afternoon lull, locked the front door. They're inside with her now. Waiting for you. A pause. It's a message, not a detention. They want you to come to them. Gideon slowed the bike. He understood the geometry of it immediately. Aldridge had changed tactics. Not a remote facility this time. The diner itself. Harlan's. The thing Loretta had held onto through every pressure this year, making her sign inside the place she was trying to protect. That was deliberate. That was the kind of deliberate that came from a man who understood humiliation as a tool. He pulled into the alley behind the diner. Cut the engine. Cole was already there, parked at the far end. Two other chapter members behind him. Same arrangement as before, visible from the back entrance. Present without entering, Gideon went in through the side door. The diner was quiet. The afternoon light coming through the front windows made it look the way it always looked at this hour. Ordinary, unhurried. Except for the two men standing at the back table, and Loretta seated in her own chair behind her own counter with a document in front of her and her hands flat on the surface. Not zip-tied this time. She didn't need to be. She was 66 years old, and they were in her home, and she knew it, and they knew she knew it. The restraint was the situation itself. When she saw Gideon, her expression shifted, not relief. Something more complicated than relief. The look of a woman who has been waiting for the cavalry and is simultaneously glad it arrived and annoyed it was necessary. Mr. Cross, the taller man said. We were hoping you'd come. I'm sure you were, Gideon said. He walked to the counter. He stood beside Loretta. He looked at the document on the surface, Brewery Transfer. Harlan's Diner, corner of Main and Dexter, Dusty Creek. Aldridge Development Group as acquiring party. He picked it up. He looked at it for a moment. Then he folded it once, cleanly, and put it in his jacket pocket. The taller man's jaw tightened. That's illegal. It's a piece of paper in my pocket, Gideon said. You can tell Aldridge I have it. You can tell him the chapter is out. The enforcement structure is gone. And a federal agent is arriving in this county tonight, with 2 years of documentation. He paused. Or you can sit down and have a slice of whatever's in the pie case and think about whether Midland is a good place to be tomorrow morning. Silence. The two men looked at each other, the arithmetic again. Gideon watched them do it, faster this time. The math had changed since the last time anyone in this room had run it. They left. The bell above the door rang once. Loretta looked at the door, then she looked at Gideon. They sat at the counter while they waited, she said. I made them coffee. He looked at her. Force of habit, she said. He almost smiled. The closest thing to a smile he had managed in 2 weeks. Let's go, he said. Darly's at the back table. There are things we all need to hear. They drove back to the diner in Gideon's truck. He had taken the truck tonight, not the bike. Loretta in the passenger seat. The drive was 11 minutes. They didn't talk. He parked behind the diner. They went in through the side door. Darly was inside. She had been there since 4. Gideon learned later, because Cole had sent her a message saying something was happening and she should stay at the diner. She was at the back table with a coffee she had not drunk. She stood up when she saw Loretta. The two women looked at each other. Loretta crossed the diner and put her arms around Darly in the particular way of someone who has been wanting to do something for a long time and has finally run out of reasons not to. Darly, who did not lean into people easily, leaned in. They stayed like that for a moment. Gideon stood by the door. He looked at the diner, the counter, the stools, the pie case, the photos on the wall. Harlan Fitch in 1961, ribbon in hand, the building knew behind him. 64 years of this corner. 64 years of people coming in with their ordinary lives, and their coffee orders and their crossword puzzles. 64 years of Dusty Creek going on being Dusty Creek. He thought about what it was worth. He thought about what he had almost helped take away. When Loretta and Darly separated, Darly looked at him across the diner. Agent Okafor arrives in 2 hours, he said. We need to talk before she gets here. Darly looked at him. She knew the conversation was coming. She had known since this morning. Sit down, she said. Loretta made coffee. Then she went upstairs. She gave them the diner. They sat at the back table. The same table where Gideon had sat across from Darly a week ago, in a different version of both of them. Outside, the Route 9 highway was quiet. The street lights on Main Street made their pale circles. In an hour or so, Sandra Okafor would arrive from Dallas with a federal inquiry and documentation that Marsh had been building toward for 2 years. The chapter was standing down. Pruitt was neutralized by the federal presence. Aldridge was in Midland, not knowing yet that the ground had shifted. In an hour, a lot of things would begin to move. But first this, Darly held her coffee in both hands. She looked at him across the table. Tell me, she said. He looked at his own coffee. He had been assembling the words since 5 in the morning. He had rehearsed them on the highway, on Marsh's porch, in the quiet of his truck on the drive back tonight. He had learned that the rehearsed version was rarely the right version. So he just said it. Your mother and I knew each other, he said, in 2001 and 2002. She came into this diner the first week she was in Dusty Creek. I was here on a routine chapter matter, nothing significant. We talked. He paused. We kept talking. For about 18 months. Darly was very still. I was 39, he said. She was 24. I knew it was complicated. I knew it was not the kind of situation I should have been in. I was chapter president. I had responsibilities and I had a reputation, and I had a world that I had built around myself that was not. It was not a world that accommodated what was developing between us. He stopped, started again. She was remarkable, he said. That's not an adequate word. She had a way of seeing things. She looked at a situation and went straight through to the center of it without being distracted by the noise around the edges. I had never met anyone who did that. He paused. I recognized it when I saw her daughter do it last week. Darly did not look away. In late 2002, she told me something was wrong, he said. That someone from her past had found out where she was, that she was in danger. She didn't tell me who. She said she didn't want me involved. I pushed. She held back. He paused. I should have pushed harder. I told myself I was respecting her choice. The truth is, I was also protecting myself. Investigating a threat to someone I was involved with would have required me to surface things I wasn't ready to surface. He looked at the table. In early 2003, she told me she was leaving. She said the situation had become untenable. She said the danger was real and she couldn't stay in Dusty Creek without bringing it here. He paused. I let her go. I told myself she would be safer away from me. I told myself there was logic to it. He stopped. The diner was very quiet. In 2004, he said, I heard she had died in Del Rio. Car accident. Single vehicle. He paused. I looked at the accident report. Darly looked up. You looked at it, she said. Yes, and you saw what I saw. Yes. She was very still. You knew, she said. You knew in 2004. I knew something was wrong with the official account. I didn't investigate it. I told myself I didn't have enough information to act on. His voice was flat. The flatness of a man not allowing himself to soften what he is saying with the tone he uses to say it. The truth is, I was afraid of what investigating it would show. About what was in my world that had reached her. About what I had failed to prevent. Silence. Darly set her coffee down. She looked at the table for a moment. Then she looked at him. You've known for 20 years, she said. Yes, and you did nothing. Yes, she died protecting you, Darly said. And you repaid that by looking at a piece of paper and deciding not to look any further. He didn't flinch from it. He had been sitting with that exact sentence since 5 in the morning. He had said it to himself in those words, or near enough times that it had moved past the point of being painful and into the territory of simply being true. Yes, he said. She looked at him. He looked back. He did not offer explanation. He did not offer the softening words that would make the shape of it more bearable. He had done enough of that. The internal accounting that kept calling practical what was actually fear, calling caution what was actually avoidance. She deserved the undecorated version. I'm not asking you to forgive it, he said. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm telling you because you have been looking for this for 6 years, and you came to this town and you earned the truth. You earned it more than once. He paused. And because your mother protected me when she should have let me stand in front of my own problems. The least I owe her is telling her daughter the truth. The diner held them both, outside, somewhere on Main Street. A dog was barking at something. Then it stopped. Darly looked down at her hands, at the knife in its sheath at her waistband, the carved walnut handle, the pattern her grandmother had put there. She thought about her grandmother. A woman who had lived a hard life in rural West Texas, who had raised Darly's mother alone, who had believed that a person needed to know how to stand still when running wasn't possible, who had carved a pattern into a knife handle with her own hands and passed it to her daughter, who had passed it, through dying, to the granddaughter she never got to know. 3 women. 3 generations of knowing when to stand still. She looked up at Gideon. My mother made a choice, she said. She chose to protect you instead of asking you to protect her. That was her choice. I don't have the right to undo it by hating you for it, she paused. But I need you to understand what it cost. Not in theory, not as an abstract regret. She held his gaze. It cost me growing up without her. It cost me the foster system and 7 apartments in 4 cities, and learning to read accident reports in a public library, because no one else was going to do it for me. He did not look away. I understand, he said. Do you? I'm starting to. She looked at him for a long moment. The man who had her killed, she said. Aldridge, yes, you're certain? I have enough to give a federal agent something to work with. Marsh has been building the documentation for 2 years. Your accident report. The shell company that sent a man to this diner in September 2003. The pattern of acquisitions in areas where inconvenient people had inconvenient accidents. He paused. It's not all there yet. But it's enough to start, and you, she said. What happens to you when the federal investigation starts? He looked at her. It was a fair question. The fairest question. He had thought about it. He had thought about it clearly and without self-decision, which was a relatively new discipline for him. I've operated outside the law for a long time, he said. I've insulated myself well. But well-insulated is not immune. When a federal investigation opens, a lot of rocks get turned over. He paused. Some of what's under my rocks is going to see daylight. You could walk away, she said. From tonight, let Marsh and Okafor handle it. Stay clean, I could, but you're not going to. No, why not? He thought about how to say it. Because I have been walking away from things my whole life, he said. And calling it strategy, and calling it practicality, and calling it everything except what it was. He paused. Your mother didn't walk away. She was 24 years old, and she walked toward the problem. She tried to solve it in the only way she could figure out. It cost her everything. Another pause. I'm 62. I have less to lose than she did and considerably more resources. It would be obscene for me to walk away from this. Darly was quiet. She looked at him with that assessing, direct look. And then she said something he had not expected. She would have liked you, she said. The version of you that's sitting here right now. He said nothing. He wasn't sure he could say anything to that. She reached across the table. She picked up his coffee cup. She handed it to him. Drink that, she said. Agent Okafor will be here in 40 minutes and you should be functioning. He took the cup. He drank. Sandra Okafor arrived at 9:40. She drove a dark blue government sedan. She was 44, tall, with a deliberate manner and a way of arranging herself in a room that communicated professional authority without requiring her to perform it. She shook hands with Gideon, with Darly, with Loretta, who had come back downstairs. She sat at the counter. She opened a laptop. She looked at Gideon. Marsh told me you'd be forthcoming, she said. I will be, he said. That's going to include things that don't benefit you. Yes, you understand you're not being offered any formal protection for cooperation at this point. This is a preliminary conversation, I understand. She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded. They started talking. The conversation lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. Gideon laid out what he knew about Aldridge's operation. The shell companies, the land acquisition pattern, the enforcement mechanism, the connection to the 2009 incident involving Harwick Draper, The September 2003 visit to the diner by a man connected to Permian Basin acquisitions. The storage facility detentions. Pruitt's involvement. Darly laid out 6 years of documentation. The accident report. The medical examiner's findings. The timeline of her mother's movements in Dusty Creek. The business card Loretta had kept for 20 years. Loretta laid out what she knew, what she had seen, what she had kept quiet about, and why. Okafor asked precise questions. She did not react to the information emotionally. She processed it the way a skilled investigator processes it, as material to be assessed, connected, tested against existing evidence. At one point she looked at Gideon and said, "The 2009 incident. A man named Harwick Draper. Were you present?" He paused for exactly 1 second. "Yes," he said. "Did you participate?" "No." "Did you have prior knowledge?" "I had reason to believe a confrontation was coming. I did not know the outcome would be fatal." "Did you report it?" "No." She made a note. She didn't editorialize. At the end, she closed her laptop. She looked at the 3 of them. "Victor Aldridge is going to have a difficult week," she said. It was the first thing she said that was not a question or a clarification. She stood up. She shook Gideon's hand again. "I'll be in touch," she said. She walked out. The diner was quiet. Loretta, behind the counter, let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for some time. Darly looked at Gideon. "Is it enough?" she said. "It's a start," he said. "Federal cases take time. They're not clean or fast. But Aldridge is going to know by morning that an inquiry has opened, and a man like that spends his whole career avoiding that specific thing." He paused. The development project dies without his direct involvement. The deadline becomes irrelevant. The pressure on the properties goes away. "And the diner?" Loretta said. "The diner stays," he said. "It was always going to stay. That was only ever Aldridge's project, not a genuine market outcome." Loretta looked at the counter, at the pie case. At the photo of her father from 1961, she nodded once. Then she went in the back and started doing the dishes. They sat outside, Gideon and Darly, on the bench in front of the diner that Pete Sallow used on his morning visits. The bench that caught the first sun on the east side of Main Street. It was 5:20 in the morning. The town was beginning its slow return. The sky over Dusty Creek went from black to deep blue to the particular pearl gray that comes just before color. Then at the eastern edge, see a thin line of orange. Not dramatic. Just the world deciding to be lit again. They had not slept. They sat with coffee and without talking for a long time. Dusty Creek woke up the way it always did. Gradual, unhurried, one small motion at a time. A light in a window above the hardware store. A truck on Route 9, moving west. The sound of someone's screen door. Tuesday had found them somehow. Gideon's dog, who had spent the night on the ranch porch, appeared at 6:15, patting down Main Street with the specific purposefulness of an animal who knew where his person was and had decided to go there. He put his head on Gideon's knee. Gideon put his hand on the dog's head. Darly watched this. "What's his name?" she asked. "Tuesday." "Why Tuesday?" "That's the day I found him." He paused. "He was in the road outside Odessa. Someone had left him there." Darly looked at the dog. "I understand that," she said. He looked at her. "Being left in the road," she said, not with self-pity. As a simple statement of experience. "Yeah," he said. "I thought you might." They sat. The orange on the eastern horizon was spreading now, getting warmer. The first actual color of the day bleeding into the gray. "I don't know what to do with it," Darly said. "All of it. What you told me, what Loretta told me. What my mother did." She looked at the street. "I've been looking for the truth for 6 years, and now I have most of it, and I don't know what to do with it." "You don't have to know yet," he said. "I feel like I should." "Why?" She thought about this. "Because I've been working toward it for so long," she said. "It should feel like an arrival. Like getting somewhere, does it?" She was quiet. "Partly," she said. "I know what happened to her. I know who's responsible. I know she made a choice that made sense to her, even if it cost everything." She paused. "What I don't know is what I'm supposed to do now. Who I am now that I'm not just the person looking." He was quiet for a moment. "I've been asking myself a version of that question for 30 years, he said. "Who I am when the structure I built around myself stops defining me." He looked at the street. "I don't have an answer. But I think the question being real is a good sign. People who've stopped growing don't ask it anymore." She looked at him. "You've been thinking about this since about 5 in the morning. Every morning for the last 2 weeks, the first real sunlight hit the top of the buildings across Main Street. That warm, specific light that comes at the exact moment the sun clears the horizon. It didn't last. In 20 minutes, the sun would be high enough that the light would be ordinary. But for this brief moment, everything on the west side of Main Street was lit gold. The diner's sign. Harlan's in the same lettering since 1961. Loretta came out. She brought 2 fresh coffees. She sat on the other end of the bench. She looked at the street with them. After a moment, Cole Draper's truck pulled up. He parked across the street. He got out. He stood by the truck for a moment, looking at the 3 of them on the bench. Then he came and sat on the curb in front of the bench. He accepted the coffee Loretta offered from a cup she had brought for herself. They sat, the 4 of them. In the first good light of a morning in Dusty Creek, Marsh Kinney's truck appeared at 6:40. He parked behind Cole's truck. He got out slowly, the way he always did, the way his spine required. He came and stood at the edge of the group. "Okafor called me," he said. "She's filing the preliminary inquiry this morning." "Good," Gideon said. Marsh looked at Darly. "Your mother's case is going to be formally reopened," he said. "Val Verde County, in coordination with the federal inquiry. It's going to take time, but it's moving." Darly nodded. Her jaw was tight for a moment. Then it released. "Thank you," she said. Marsh sat on the curb next to Cole. He looked at his coffee. "Aldridge was arrested at his Midland office at 6 this morning," he said. It was matter of fact. The tone of a man reporting weather. Okafor moved faster than expected. "Federal hold, no bail hearing until next week." Nobody said anything for a moment, and Pruitt, Cole asked. "Administrative leave pending investigation. His deputy, Carla Weston, is running the office." Marsh paused. "She's been trying to do the right thing in that building for 11 years. She'll be fine." Darly looked at Main Street. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. At 7, Loretta went inside to open the diner. She unlocked the front door, flipped the sign from closed to open. Started the coffee. Pete Sallow appeared at 7:15, same as always. Sat at his stool, ordered coffee, unfolded his crossword puzzle, noticed that there were more people in the diner than usual for a Wednesday morning, and found this mildly interesting. Gideon sat at the counter. He ordered eggs. Darly took the order. She wrote it on the pad the same way she wrote every order. Steady. Left to right. She put the ticket on the wheel. She came back to the counter to refill Pete's coffee. 14 across, Pete said. 7 letters. What endures after everything else is gone? Darly looked at the puzzle. Legacy, she said. Pete tried it. That's it, he said. He sounded pleased in the private way of crossword solvers. Darly set the coffee pot down. She looked out the front window at Main Street, at the bench out front, at the town going about the beginning of its day, at the sky over Dusty Creek. Fully light now, the particular deep blue of a West Texas July morning that went on and on above the flat land without interruption. She thought about her mother at 24, walking into this diner, ordering eggs, eating them slowly, staying. She thought about what it meant to stay somewhere. Not because you were trapped, not because you had nowhere else to go, but because the place had offered you something and you had decided consciously to be someone who accepts what is offered. She thought about a woman she had never met who had made choices that cost everything, and also, in ways that were hard to hold at the same time, led here. Led to this morning, this diner, this town, these people around this counter. She thought about the knife at her waist. Her grandmother had made the handle. Her grandmother had said, "You can't always run. Sometimes you stand still." She was standing still in Dusty Creek, West Texas, at a diner counter with a coffee pot in her hand on a Wednesday morning in July. She thought that might be enough for now. It might be enough. At 8:30, Gideon finished his eggs. He put money on the counter. He stood up. He looked at Darly. "I'm going to the ranch," he said. "There are things there that need attention." A pause. "The barn roof needs work. The southwest corner has been soft since spring. I've been putting it off." Darly looked at him. "Is that your way of saying you'll be around?" she asked. "That's my way of saying the barn roof needs work." She looked at him for a moment, the straight, assessing look. Then, "There's a hardware store on this street that's going to need a new owner soon. Aldridge's holding company won't survive the federal inquiry." He looked at her. "Somebody's going to have to run it," she said. "This town needs a hardware store." He picked up his keys. "One thing at a time," he said. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on it. He didn't turn around. "She would have liked you too," he said. "Your mother. She would have recognized you." He pushed the door open. The bell rang once. He walked out into the morning. Tuesday was waiting on the sidewalk. They walked together to the truck. The old Ford, not the bike. He got in. He sat for a moment with the window down. He could hear the diner behind him, the ordinary sound of it. Coffee, conversation, a life going on being itself. He started the engine. He drove west on Main Street. Past the hardware store, past the empty lot, past the grain elevators standing quiet in the morning, past the edge of town where the road opened up and the sky opened up with it. The flat land and the big sky and the dry, patient grass. The barn roof needed work. He had put it off long enough.